Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Heather Stone is one of the most successful functional medicine practitioners in the world. She has spent the last 21 years helping patients reverse various chronic diseases. Her focus is on helping women return to the person that they know themselves to be experiencing a total thyroid transformation. She is passionate about health, longevity, gardening, cooking, regenerative farming, and raising her animals on her ranch. She also currently runs two functional medicine clinics, as well as Born to Heal Ranch and Retreat, which is a functional medicine retreat center for women dealing with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Throughout her career, Dr. Heather has been instrumental in showing tens of thousands of patients how to reverse long-standing health problems with a focus on type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism, and cognitive decline. She is also the author of her amazing book, Thyroid Transformation Blueprint. Dr. Heather is married and has two sons, Cam and Cannon, and currently lives on her ranch in Texas with her family and two dogs. When she is not working, she is reading, meditating, cooking, or traveling the world. Dr. Heather Stone, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you for having me.
It's such an honor to host you. I told you off air, this is by far my weakest area. And for all the interviews we've done talking with experts around the world about Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, I still get thoroughly confused about all of it. So I'm so glad that you're taking the time to be on our show today. And if nothing else, help me set my record straight and get things right. And also our listeners, because this is such a prevalent problem and such an important thing that you decided to devote your life to, which we'll talk about in a minute. But tell us about your ranch in Texas.
Well, this is somewhat of a new venture for me. In 2021, I decided after COVID that I needed to have a change. So we moved from Colorado down to Texas, which is where I was raised, and my family's here in Texas. So we wanted to become a little more self-sufficient and really have more control over the food that we were eating. And I really got into regenerative farming. And, we have all kinds of animals. I've got cows and sheep and pigs and chickens and turkeys and a huge garden. So, it's a really big passion of mine. And I decided to host retreats here to allow women to get back to nature, to allow them to understand where their food comes from, why that's important. Because at the end of the day, we've all heard this saying, you are what you eat. But I like to take that a little bit further because actually you are what you eat eats. So you need to pay attention to where your food comes from, what it's been fed, and how it's been raised, because that's really what impacts your health.
That's really amazing. Where did you move from Colorado? What area?
We lived in the Castle Rock area, but I had a clinical, like brick and mortar practice in the more Denver area.
Got it. Yeah, Castle Rock is a beautiful area.
Yeah.
I can't think of Castle Rock and not thinking about going a little bit further south and doing the incline hike at Manitou,
Ah,
which is absolutely
yeah.
brutal.
I
Yeah,
did that
I
several times. It's one of my favorite things I did in Colorado. It felt like a good, amazing accomplishment the first time. Then I was trying to be like, okay, how can I improve my time and beat some of these little kids that are running up this incline?
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What I remember was not necessarily just little kids, but older dudes like
Yeah.
flying up that thing like
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. The military trains on that, and they actually wear weighted vests going up the incline. So I was like,
No,
holy
thanks.
cow. I'm just trying to compete with the little ones that are running up.
That's hilarious. I still haven't forgiven my friend who took me on that hike, a quote unquote hike. This was about a decade ago, and I actually think I'm still sore from doing that
Yeah.
a decade ago.
It's
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
quite an accomplishment.
That's amazing. Well, where in Texas are you located then?
I am in between Houston and College Station.
Okay, nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, so tell us about what it was like to transition over to regenerative farming. Did you know much about it when you first started, or has this been basically like building the plane as you've been flying it?
I've kind of been building it as I'm learning about it. And I will say I studied a lot before we kind of jumped in. So any waking moment I got, I was taking courses and researching and talking to other people that were doing regenerative farming. And the property that we are on, it was more of a horse property. They didn't have any other animals, and they tried to make a polo field. And so they scraped off all of the soil. And if you don't know what regenerative farming is, what it really is that you're trying to really improve the health of the soil, because when you improve the health of the soil, you are improving the quality of the grass that the animals are eating. And then you really think about, the cycles of the grass and the health of and the probiotics and all the bacteria in the soil. So I learned as I was going, and needless to say that the property that we were on wasn't as healthy as what we would have liked. There was a lot of areas with no grass whatsoever. It's kind of sandy here, and horses, they eat the grass all the way down pretty much to the root. So we got rid of all chemicals that were here. No more glyphosate or weed killer or anything. So we kind of had to do an overhaul and retrain the ranch hands that were here. And now we have been here for about 3 years, and it looks completely different. There is no bare ground. There is grass growing everywhere. And then we're rotating our animals very strategically so that we are paying attention to life cycles of parasites. We let our animals free range on certain minerals so that they're replacing what the grass in the ground is missing. So it's really a beautiful thing. And trying to learn how to work with the environment and try to establish balance again is pretty awesome. My husband and I always say when we first moved here, it was a little creepy because there were no animals. Like there were no birds, there were no squirrels. It kind of felt like really bare. And the more that we started to cultivate the ecosystem again and really start to restore balance, it literally sounds like an orchestra here at night. There are birds everywhere. There you can see bugs all in the different seasons. So it's been pretty amazing to see that life cycle really return.
Oh my goodness, that sounds absolutely dreamy. What a cool experience. I think
Yeah.
most of us, the closest we'd ever come to that experience is watching a documentary like The Biggest Little Farm or whatever, and
Yeah.
realizing they had huge financial assets to be able to do what they did. However, they were able to restore that piece of land and all the animals came back and that tremendous amount of diversity and how they were able to solve problems with other things that were coming through was super cool. And obviously as humans, we're omnivores and we can eat plants and animals, but
Yeah.
a lot of people that listen to our show are choosing for one reason or another to do a carnivore diet.
Mhm.
And one of the things we have to grapple with anybody, I would argue, that's eating meat is understanding that like you're taking a life to be able to provide for your own life. And so I'm always curious for people who ranch, you must get very close to these animals and like get to know their little personalities. Like even just like you think like a simple cow, like I know ranchers who like name their cows and sometimes the babies are kept inside and play with the kids, like all these like things. How challenging is it to be ranching and also knowing that you're providing food for yourself one day? I'm assuming you're harvesting your own cows on your own property. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. So we raise all of our animals for food, but I think it's important to understand like we have breeding stock, right? So we have certain cows that are the ones that are going to be having babies. So those we are not going to eat. So those are my pets, and I brush them and I play with them. And just last night, my son goes, "Mom, what were you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, my usual, making my rounds, talking to the animals." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're a crazy lady." So yes, I have my pet sheep. So I have all my mama sheep that are there having babies that we're not going to eat. They're all named. They come and they give me hugs. And I've got my mama pigs that we are not going to eat. So, for me, I'm very just specific in particular about who I name and who I know is going to, be in my freezer one of these days. So I love all of them. But I just try to make sure, even my family, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and we will name some of them, like one of my pigs, we name it Bacon if it's going to go in the freezer. So they know that this is going to go in the freezer. So you just kind of have to separate. But I think for me, knowing that these animals are loved, they are treated really well, they are allowed to free range and be in nature. For me, I think that we're going to eat animals no matter what. At least we can eat animals that are raised well, that are happy and healthy, and are in a stressful environment. And so you do have to separate. But for me, I just have the ones I know we're not going to eat, and those are my pets.
I love that. That sounds like a Disney movie or something. Yeah, and it's so cool that like understanding that the plants need the animals need the plants. Like, it's all that cycle that you said. Like, you would not be able to treat the soil, make the soil any better without the fertilizer, and the other animals need to spread it out. You need the birds, you need all of it to be able to make this like sustainable thing, and to see that so much life has come back to the area must be amazing. Just being out here in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, even since the pandemic, just having more time to wander around my little neighborhood and our little lake, you get to know the cycle of life and the days and when they change, which birds go where and what direction and all this stuff. And you appreciate it so much more. And it must be just such an exponential degree more that you get to appreciate being out really truly in nature all the time and get to appreciate some of those cycles. Must be amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's important because, most of us, especially in America, are in a life where we are living inside of buildings. We are not in nature. And that's one of the major issues that we're having with chronic degenerative disease, is that we get stuck in this sympathetic overdrive and we don't take time out to be in nature. That's one of the easiest ways that you can put your body back into more of a parasympathetic state. Parasympathetic is when your body can rest, digest, and heal. It cannot do those things when you're in sympathetic overdrive, when we're constantly stressed out. And so that was one of the things that I have noticed that really changed, because I was someone who lived in a suburb. I drove 45 minutes to an hour to work every day. I worked inside of a building. Yes, for lunch, I might go outside and walk and try to be in nature in the middle of the city, and then go back in the office for the rest of the day, drive home for 45 minutes, eat, watch TV, and go to sleep. And I think that if we could take some time out, and luckily at that time I lived in Colorado, so my weekends were hiking and there was lots of outdoor things that we could do. But I think it is important that we start to get back to nature and put that back into our lives, because we are all moving towards chronic degenerative diseases because we are stuck in sympathetic overdrive.
Yeah, that's very well explained, and a perfect segue into your work. Yeah, learning about you and your work and your own personal story. Obviously, most of us get into what we do because of our own personal history, and you certainly have a story to tell as far as that goes. So, can you tell us a little bit about your own health, kind of growing up where you did, and some of the things that you dealt with, health-wise, throughout you deciding what you were going to do for your career?
Sure. So, I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't really know what kind of doctor I wanted to be. Just a quick short story. I thought I wanted to be a dentist. So when I was in college, right before I was going to take the dental entrance exam, I went and I thought, oh, I should probably follow a dentist to make sure this is what I really want to do. And I lasted like an hour and I said, I am out of here. This is not what I like. Blood everywhere. People were crying. I'm like, this is not what I want to do. So then had to get on this thing about what is it that I want to do? What kind of doctor do I want to be? But in the meantime, while I was trying to figure that out, I was really struggling with my weight. I was struggling with energy. And I just was not finding any solutions. My hormones were out of balance. I go to an OB-GYN and I said, I think I have a thyroid issue. Now, this was pre Dr. Google, right? This was way before we had the internet. And the only information I had was out of a textbook. So, I was reading, I was in pre-med, and I said, I think I might have low thyroid. Could you check me for that? These are all the symptoms that I'm dealing with. And he said, sure. So I go back a week later and he's like, yeah, your thyroid's fine. There's nothing wrong there. And he's like, I think your menstrual cycles are messed up because you exercise too much. And as he's leaving the room, he's like, oh, by the way, you're probably not going to be able to have kids naturally. So when you want to start having kids, we can help you with fertility treatment. And I was like, what did he just say to me? But first of all, I didn't believe what he was saying, because he told me that the reason that I didn't have a menstrual cycle was because I exercised too much. But I actually knew, because I was an athlete and I ran track, that I knew that a lot of, serious athletes, especially for females, when their body fat goes below 10%, they lose their menstrual cycle. That I was 50 pounds overweight. So I'm like, whatever he just said to me was not true. And I'm not going to buy that I'm not going to have children, when I get older. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. And whatever he just said, I am not going to buy into that. And I'm going to figure out how to fix myself. And so as I was going through this journey, that's when I realized, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to really help women with this issue. And it was even more clear once I was able to lose the weight, start to feel better, regulate my hormones, and then, have children naturally without fertility treatment. So that's kind of my story. I've been there and I've been through it. And I think it's really crazy because most women with low thyroid, that's their story. They just
You
get
hear that
told,
story.
yeah, every single day. They just get told, you need to go exercise and lose weight. You need to just eat less and lose weight. Or they get told, well, you have all these symptoms because you have low thyroid. You're just going to have to deal with it. And so, it's not true. And our bodies are born to heal. So there is always a solution.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that line. Our bodies are born to heal, and I know you use that quite a bit. And for the people that are listening and not watching, Dr. Heather has found her life calling for sure, and she's doing what she was called to do. But if she had decided to be a dentist, Dr. Heather has like perfect teeth, so you would have been a very, very good dentist at least.
Well, funny story is I did have a crush on my orthodontist when I was little, which is why I thought I wanted to be a dentist. So he was a good orthodontist.
That's amazing. That's hilarious. Oh, I absolutely love that. Okay, so let's get a general like state of the state as far as like thyroid, Hashimoto's, autoimmune, everyone. Like pretty much like everybody is experiencing this. And it's so ubiquitous today that it's almost like you'd expect somebody to say they were dealing with it than they weren't dealing with it. It's almost like more rare that somebody doesn't have Hashimoto's. What the hell happened? Is this something that we've always had for a long time? Is this new? What is going on with this?
Well, so just so everybody understands and knows, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the thyroid. That is why most people have low thyroid. So Hashimoto's occurs in about 90 to 98% of women who have low thyroid. It's almost always caused by an underlying autoimmune condition. Now, if we take a step back and we say, like what you asked, what in the world happened? Like, I don't, I don't think that most people knew about Hashimoto's many decades ago. But what we are looking at in the research is when they started to iodinize the salt. That is when Hashimoto's really started to explode. So we can see it in China, we can see it in Japan, we can see it in the United States and many other countries. As soon as they started iodinizing the salt, it really triggers autoimmunity and specifically Hashimoto's. So that's kind of when this all started. Now, there's other things in our environment that also contribute to this issue, but I think this is what really made it explode in our population.
I have never heard that before. That's crazy. Didn't they start putting iodine with salt because we had iodine deficiencies, especially like in the middle part of the country?
Well, that's what they say. Yes, that's what they say. But that's usually that is not actually, I think, why they started to iodinize the salt. But I don't know enough about that to talk too much about why they started to do that. But they did it, and it caused an explosion in Hashimoto's.
That's crazy. I have never heard about that. That's crazy. So just before we leave that topic on that note, should if people are eating iodized salt, should they stop immediately?
Yeah, so that's what I recommend to my patients is that we don't ever touch table salt. It is bleached, it is iodinized, it has all kinds of other things that they add into it. And so if you want to use salt, which you should, because salt is really healthy, we should be eating more of like a Celtic sea salt or a Himalayan sea salt, any of the sea salts that are more natural, not iodinized table salt.
Okay, good to know. Thanks. Yeah, we love talking about salt as well. And I'm lucky here. I live in Utah and we're close to Redmond, where they
Ah,
produce an amazing sea salt, which is really good.
yeah.
It's an ancient sea salt, but yeah, okay, that's awesome. I had no idea about that. What are other some of the other?
I feed my cows Redmond sea salt.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Very cool. What are some other lifestyle factors that are playing into this as well? There must be, we're just living in such a toxic environment. There's so many other things at play, but what are some of the major contributors as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, so when you're looking at autoimmunity, because ultimately when you have Hashimoto's, that's what this is. It's not a primary low thyroid problem. The autoimmune condition is causing the low thyroid, but you have to really get down to what's causing the autoimmunity. And so when you look at that, you have to look at many different things in the body, right? So we have to evaluate your blood sugar and insulin resistance. This is by far the number one issue that most of us have, especially when we have low thyroid, and it's our blood sugar. All right. Number two, we want to look at our hormones. Hormone surges cause the immune system to attack the body when you have an autoimmune condition. And then what you were referring to is toxins. We deal with mold toxins. And interestingly enough, genetically, many, if not most of the people that I deal with have an inability to recognize and clear mold toxins. So these toxins keep circulating and circulating in our bodies, and they cause all kinds of major symptoms. You know, about 30% of the population in general, they have a genetic defect where they, or a gene where they can't recognize and clear toxins. But in my patient population, it is rare that I find someone who doesn't genetically have that issue. So I would say most people who have Hashimoto's have a hard time clearing mold. And I'm talking about mold that comes from water damage in buildings. So when drywall gets wet, it'll start growing mold within 24 hours and it spews off these mycotoxins. And then when we breathe those in, it creates brain fog. It'll be hard for you to remember words in the middle of sentences. It'll be hard to focus and concentrate, hard to retain new information. It will cause weight gain, insulin resistance, chronic fatigue, and it triggers autoimmunity. So, you know, mold toxins are a big deal. And then we also look at heavy metals. We look at environmental toxins. We also have to look at food sensitivities and underlying infections. All of those things really are impacting the immune system and are triggers and contributors to all the symptoms that we're dealing with.
Got it. That was very well explained. The mold thing. This is so hard to talk about because there's like no easy solution. If you told me like I have a food sensitivity, I need to eat a certain way, like yeah, that might create a little bit of consternation. But like if you told me I have mold in my home, like what do you like? You have to move or you have to replace the sheetrock. Like what if are those the only solutions as far as like dealing with mold if somebody has that issue?
Well, if you have mold growing in the house, then yes, that's really one of the only the only solutions is you've got to get rid of it. You have to get out of the exposure. Now, it's not necessarily as bad all the time. So a lot of people think, oh my gosh, there's mold in my house. I got to take everything down to the studs. And that's not usually what has to happen. If you find the right people, they can really figure out where the mold is. And usually it's not a huge issue. I mean, sometimes it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And I work with so many patients where it's pretty easy to figure out where it's at and get it replaced. Like for me, I moved into a log cabin on my ranch and it was built in the 90s. And I was like, oh, great. Is there mold in here? So we did like a classic mold test and it came back clear. But a lot of times if you just do the air sample test, it doesn't get the mold fragments. It just gets the full mold spore. And there's also mold spores that are heavy, in particular Stachybotrys, and it falls. It doesn't stay in the air, so you're going to miss it. And that's one of the most toxic molds. So I did a mold test myself, a DNA test and a PCR test. And sure enough, it came back. We had, you know, a lot of mold toxins in the air. So we got someone out here, we fogged the house, we made sure that there was no active mold growing. We cleaned all of our air vents. I did not know this, but in Colorado, I only had to clean my air vents like once a year because it's more of a dry climate. In Texas, no, I'm sorry. It was every like 5 to 10 years. You actually do a full duct clean out. In
Oh,
Texas, they're like, you have to do it every single year. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not know that. So we got UV lights put into the duct system so it kills the mold as it goes out. We have air purifiers. And then we did a kind of a deep clean. And then the mold count is really low. And I didn't have to replace any drywall or anything like that. So there are solutions, and it doesn't mean that you just have to take everything down to the stud. So I don't think that people should be concerned about that. But the other thing that you have to weigh is, what is this doing to your health? And I think, depending on how sensitive you are and how reactive your immune system is, it's like if you have to spend, a few $1,000s cleaning your house, or you have to spend tens of thousands of dollars handling a health issue or a health crisis, and you don't live a great quality of life. I think that, on the one hand, it's inconvenient and it's annoying, but it is way worth it because it is so detrimental to your brain. I actually have been able to work with patients where we did a pre-volumetric MRI, so we could see the volume of the brain. So when people have cognitive decline, it's actually that their brain is shrinking. And when you're dealing with mold toxins, it's a very specific part of the brain called the cingulate and the basal ganglia that starts to decrease in volume. And then after we clear the mold toxins from the system, we were able to redo a volumetric MRI after 9 months, and we saw significant increases in volume in the brain. So
Wow.
I think we can't underestimate the impact that mold is having, but also we shouldn't underestimate how our health can improve when you remove that underlying trigger or burden.
Wow, that's such a good point. And a past guest has kind of said the same thing. Like, if this is important to you, you'll take steps. You'll do what it takes. A few $1,000s, it sucks. It's not
Yeah.
great, but it's your health. And I would want to know, like, what car do you drive? How big is your home? Like, what are you choosing to prioritize your spending on? And why are you not spending it on your house? That's crazy about the brain volume. My friends and family will tell you that my brain could definitely use a little bit more volume, so I should look into that. But so what you're describing comprehensive testing, blood, food sensitivities, mold testing. Like, there's all these things that you're checking. So maybe this would be a good time to tell us, like, what is it like to work with you and have some of this stuff done versus somebody going to a traditional standard kind of doctor? What things are they going to get tested? It never seems like it's enough. Like, they always seem like they're missing something. They get exactly the same story, like we said earlier, that you said. Like, I've heard that story from everyone who has that same experience. Can you contrast the difference of, like, what it's like in the normal medical system, what things they might get right and what things they get wrong, versus working with somebody like yourself?
Yeah, so we have to really understand how the medical system is set up. So we have to really get it that the medical system is set up to diagnose disease and prescribe some kind of drug therapy or surgery, right? So it is a disease drug therapy model. And there is a time and place for that. But I will say the people that are really trying to optimize their health, that are trying to improve their health, reverse disease, they're going to be disappointed every time in that system, because that system is specifically set up to diagnose a disease and give you drug therapy or surgery. All right. So, when you go to a doctor and let's say you've got low thyroid, just like I did, if I did have low thyroid with that doctor, I mean, I do have low thyroid and Hashimoto's, but at that time it didn't show up, or he didn't test me thoroughly enough. So what came out of that is nothing's wrong with you essentially, but you're going to have major problems, as you age. So come back and see me when I can give you a drug. And a lot of us fall through the cracks there because we have all these symptoms, but we don't have a diagnosis or a disease. And so they either medicate the symptoms, or they just tell you nothing's wrong with you. You need to go lose weight and exercise. Oh, it's just your age. It's menopause. It's postmenopause. It's perimenopause, whatever it is. Right. And so in more of a functional medicine role, we're looking for what are the underlying imbalances that are causing the symptom. So the way that your body communicates with you is, your body was born to heal. You heard me say that earlier. It's a self-healing organism. So the body is always trying to heal. It's always trying to move towards survival. It's always protecting you, even though sometimes, especially when we're dealing with low thyroid, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like it's cooperating, but that's because we don't understand what it's trying to communicate. So when there's an underlying imbalance that the body is having a hard time overcoming, it gives you a symptom. And this is how it's telling you that something is not quite right and it needs a little help. So when it gives you a symptom at first, the symptom usually isn't that severe. So we kind of try to deal with it or shove it down or ignore it or take a Tylenol and just move on with our lives. But the more that that imbalance grows, the stronger the symptom is going to be. And if you cover it with medication, you're going to get another symptom, right? So because the body's always trying to communicate. Now, in functional medicine, we're always looking to get down to the root cause of why someone has a symptom or a disease process. And the goal is to reverse the disease. The goal is to move the body back into optimum health, not just suppress the symptom. And that is the big difference. Now, when you go into a doctor's office, a traditional doctor's office, they're going to run the labs that will diagnose a disease and determine what medication that you have to take. Now, many doctors are held to a certain standard where they're not allowed to run a bunch of lab tests because it doesn't change the treatment. A lot of the insurance companies and managed care, they don't allow them to run more labs like we would want to run because it just doesn't change treatment. For example, if someone has low thyroid, the treatment is thyroid hormones. Now you can get on any variation of thyroid hormone, whether it's Armour, Synthroid, or levothyroxine, or NP thyroid. You can do liothyronine. There's all kinds of different combinations. But when they start checking for Hashimoto's just says, okay, you have an autoimmune condition that's causing the low thyroid, but it doesn't change the treatment. So they really don't run even to check for Hashimoto's because it doesn't necessarily dictate how they would treat you. And so that's where the big disconnect is. They also don't run thorough labs to understand, like, what is thyroid physiology doing? All they're looking at mostly is a TSH because that tells them, oh, they're hypothyroid, they need thyroid hormones. But there's actually 12 different markers that make up a thyroid panel that allow us to understand how is the thyroid actually functioning. One part of the thyroid is that the thyroid mostly makes a hormone called T4. The body doesn't even use T4. The body has to convert that T4 into T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormone, but they're not even looking at that. Really, what they're looking at is the TSH, which isn't even made by the thyroid, it's made by the pituitary. So there's all kinds of things that can happen between the pituitary and the thyroid, but that really doesn't get looked at or addressed because their solution is thyroid hormones, and that's all they're really going to look at. But for me, on the functional side, I want to understand, how is the pituitary functioning? Is that functioning properly? How is the thyroid functioning? Do you have an underconversion problem? If you do, why do you have a underconversion problem? Is it a blood sugar issue? Is it a toxicity issue? Is it a nutrient issue? So there's all kinds of things that we can do to dive much, much deeper to understand why the body is communicating in the way that it's communicating. And that's when you actually get results. The other thing I think is really important in traditional medicine, everything is divided into systems, right? So you go to the endocrinologist to look at your thyroid and diabetes, and then you go to the nephrologist if you have kidney issues, and the cardiologist if you have heart issues. But the body doesn't work like that. There is no separation. Everything works together, and you have to, like, if you have a thyroid problem and you only look at the thyroid, then you're going to be missing so many other things that are impacted by the thyroid or that impact the thyroid. So like I said earlier, you've got to open up your scope and look at, okay, what's your blood sugar doing? What's your toxicity load? What are your food sensitivities? So you've got to look at the whole system and not just focus in on where we think the problem is.
Yeah, wow. That was pretty good for your first time. Pretty good explanation, I'd say. Not bad. Not bad for your first
I mean,
day here.
I could keep going.
So it was okay. It was okay. That was an absolute masterclass. I'm gonna have to watch that back several times to get a little grip of that. But yeah, pretty good for a rookie. Your work is outside of the insurance model, correct?
For the most part, yes. I mean, if patients have some insurance benefits where they might cover an office visit or something like that, we will help. We will help the patients take advantage of that. But I think that's really important to understand that traditional medicine and insurance, they have done a really good job to make us think that it is healthcare and health insurance, but it is sick care and sick care insurance. So they are not interested in reversing chronic disease. They are not interested in helping you have more longevity. They're not interested in you optimizing your life. But it's really a sick care model that we get really frustrated at. But if you really understand what it is and how it's set up and the purpose of it, then we can stop getting so frustrated and go figure out the solution that we want.
Yeah, I hope one day I get off by somebody that works in the health insurance model or health insurance business, because they're the worst. And I'll always beat that drum. The insurance sucks. It sucks for everybody, for the practitioners, for the people that buy it. It never covers anything. Everybody's on high deductible plans. They're paying
Yeah.
so much money for it. It doesn't cover anything anyway. It's so much better in a cash-based system. So it's cool that you're able to kind of dance with both and use the best of both worlds. I think
Yeah.
it's a great way to work.
Well, I think it's interesting. I had a potential patient's husband ask me, well, my insurance company, if you don't accept my insurance, they can't negotiate down your pricing. I'm like, yes. And I'm not sure that you would want a doctor that would work at a very discounted price. And also, I was like, do you realize that they times 20 their bill just so when they discount it, they can actually make a profit? So I don't have to times 20 my bill. I can make sure that it works for me, you, and all of the team, and give your, the patients the best care. But why are we going to play that game? And I don't know about you, but I don't want an insurance company dictating my care. And I hear all the time, my doctor said he won't run those labs because my insurance won't cover it. And I'm like, okay, so you're not going to get the labs that you need and get the care that you need because your insurance isn't going to cover it. So I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't put them in charge of my health.
Absolutely not. They're the worst. They're absolutely the worst. It's a cool. Like I said, it's cool that you found a way to kind of dance between those things and offer it where necessary. You did mention insulin resistance earlier in the conversation, and I would hope that most of our listeners will be a little bit aware of what insulin resistance is. But pretend I've never heard of it. Explain to me what insulin resistance is and what some of the major causes would be.
Okay, so insulin resistance, first of all, it's why almost every person, if you have a weight issue, I have yet to be proven wrong, you have an insulin resistance issue or a blood sugar problem. All right, so essentially, when we eat sugar, okay, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, cookies, candy, cake, soda, you're going to have a massive influx of glucose into your system. And the pancreas starts to produce insulin when it touches your tongue, right? Because it's like, uh-oh, incoming, we've got lots of sugar. I got to produce all this insulin. The purpose of insulin is to bind to the cell, and it kind of opens up the floodgates so that your body the cells can allow glucose into the cell. When you have glucose into the cell, that's when your mitochondria make ATP, which is your energy. And then if you have excess, once the cell is full and it can't take any more sugar, the insulin's no longer effective at the cell, and then all that sugar is staying in your bloodstream. Then all that sugar gets turned into a triglyceride, and that gets stored as fat. You actually can't store fat without the presence of insulin. All right. So over time, the more insulin, the more blood sugar you have, the more sugar and glucose you have in the bloodstream, the more insulin that gets secreted, the more insulin exposure your cells have, the more insulin resistant they become. And what's really crazy is this works with every single hormone. If you have an overabundance of a hormone in the body, let's say on your cell you have 20 receptor sites, right? So the cell can receive insulin and it can open up for the sugar, and then the insulin goes away. But the more insulin you have, the less receptor sites you have, right? So let's say you started with 20, but because you're eating so much sugar over time, now you only have 4 receptor sites on the cell. And so then the insulin doesn't dock on the cell as well, and you become insulin resistant. So now more of that sugar stays in the bloodstream, and you've got to get rid of that sugar and store as much of it as you can as fat. Now, as this process happens, it will turn into insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, and diabetes. And this is important to understand that this happens on a spectrum. So the first part of that spectrum is hypoglycemia. That's a problem because when your blood sugar goes down, your liver still has to secrete insulin to get more sugar into the cell, because that's how it makes energy and ATP. But the more you have even hypoglycemia or a blood sugar variability, which means your blood sugar is unstable, your blood sugar goes up and down all day, the more insulin resistant you're going to become over time. And I will say the first sign that you have a blood sugar problem or insulin resistance is when you start to gain weight. So that's really where it starts. And I would say the most common thing before someone gets diagnosed with insulin resistance is they have a lot of blood sugar variability, so they can't stabilize their blood sugar.
Very well explained. That was a wonderful explanation. And yeah, I totally agree. And if you know the signs and symptoms, obviously the weight gain is a big thing, but knowing, when you start to feel that shakiness, you drink the soda, you feel really good for a little while,
Yeah.
that roller coaster up and down, you can recognize those signs. It's just so unfortunate that we diagnose the diseases that you mentioned, prediabetes, diabetes, by the glucose number and not necessarily the insulin number. Because if we were focused on insulin, we could catch all of this so much sooner. It's just, we've got it
Yeah.
all completely backwards.
Well, and also you have to realize that you have to look at this from a functional perspective, right? Like there's other markers that I run, like glycomark and fructosamine, and we do run fasting insulin. I look at LDH, I look at cortisol levels. Like if you look at glycomark, that tells you how stable your blood sugar's been, like throughout the 12 hours before you did your labs. Now, fructosamine is more of a 14-day average before you do the labs, and both of those markers tell me blood sugar stability or blood sugar variability. And I think we'd all be surprised. For me personally, I'm always trying the latest things first. I'm my own guinea pig before I ever introduce anything to my patients. But when intermittent fasting came out, a decade ago or whatever, I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It goes against everything I've ever known. But I could eat, I could not eat. It's totally fine. It's annoying for me to eat and stop and, all of that stuff in the morning. So good. So I'm like, somebody says it's all right. And there's studies that say it's okay. So I'm going to do intermittent fasting. So I was intermittent fasting. I could go until like 2 o'clock. So I was probably doing 16 to 18 hours intermittent fasting. I didn't feel amazing and I could tell my blood sugar was going down. But interestingly enough, I started to gain weight. I'm like, what is happening? I'm barely eating and I don't know how I'm gaining weight. This is crazy. So then I went and got my blood work done and my A1C was pre-diabetic. And I thought, what? Me? I like, how can I do this? I help people reverse their blood sugar issues all day long. So then I went back and I said, okay, I've been doing something that I didn't normally do. So let me go get my glycomark. And my glycomark was so low, it should be above 15. And mine was underneath the lab range at 6. And so I thought, holy cow, I have major blood sugar variability issues. So this was before continuous glucose monitors, which now I work with on every single patient. But I was pricking my finger every 30 minutes. And so when I woke up, it was like 100. And then every 30 minutes, my blood sugar started to climb and it was 130 by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had
Wow.
not eaten anything. And so, it's really important that you understand this whole blood sugar thing and blood sugar variability issue. And you don't necessarily have to have diabetes to have this issue, but blood sugar, honestly, blood sugar issues are at the heart of every single chronic degenerative disease. And you cannot stabilize and put any autoimmune disease into remission unless you fix blood sugar.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. What a crazy story, and it breaks all the circuitry in my brain to think that the fasting was pushed a little bit too much for you. And you do see that, especially with some women. It's the reason why I don't always recommend like very low carbohydrate diets or carnivore diets to my patients or my clients. Excuse me. I help people if that's what they want to do, but I'm not out there like recommending telling people to do that. And one of the things that always surprises me is looking at CGM data to see how individual and unique everything is. Like some people like have huge surges with watermelon and strawberries. Somebody like
Yep.
you, it sounds like you can have more fruit and your blood sugar stays totally fine. I've seen people eat what I would consider extremely benign, like vegetables, like fibrous vegetables, and they have rises in blood sugar. Are you ever surprised as you're like reviewing CGM data, either from yourself or from your patients?
Well, I would say this, my population of patients is pretty controlled, meaning like I'm really only seeing patients with thyroid issues and they all have weight issues. So they're going to have a lot of blood sugar issues to start with. So what I have seen is that most patients, in order to start to reverse this and to stabilize blood sugar, we have to go pretty significant or pretty strict high protein and green vegetables only for a while to get their body to move in the right direction, to allow the body to heal and to get into a place where their body is more adaptive. And we have to stay in that place for a while until things start to settle down. And then we can see if we can introduce more starchy vegetables and fruit. But I would say most patients don't do well with fruit, except for some can tolerate berries without really any major issue. But for the most part, high protein, lots of green veggies, but you also have to be careful. I've seen a lot. I kind of fluctuate between pretty strict keto and then sometimes move into carnivore, but not for long periods of time. Because at the end of the day, I believe we're omnivores. That's what our teeth are like. And it's not that carnivore can't be helpful for a short period of time. I just don't think should be a lifestyle. But if you get the green vegetables that are low in oxalates, low in lectins, and you look to see how your body tolerates that, that's usually the best thing to stabilize your blood sugar until you get things leveled out, and then you can have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. And we in the carnivore space need to always check ourselves and remember that like you may have tried a carnivore diet for some reason and maybe you're good. Maybe that's it. Like for me, I've been on it for 6 years. I feel great. I can keep going and it's fine. Great. But you don't always have to do the exact same thing over and over. And I especially notice it with cycling women. It just doesn't seem like the very best thing to do long term. Mixing in other things, some benign forms of carbohydrates that you know are not spiking your sugar, maybe certain
Yeah.
vegetables. Like you said, I was going to ask you if you personally see like oxalate issues, people that are overdoing it on certain vegetables. I mean, is that something that you do notice, or in your opinion, is that maybe like overplayed by some people?
I will say this. Um, I think this whole oxalate thing, I've known about oxalates for a long time, obviously. We know that when you have high oxalates, it can cause kidney stones, and you'll see oxalic acid or oxalic crystals in the urine. But I used to think that was the only people that really had issues with oxalates. But the more research that I've done, I noticed that I will see people with kidney issues, even chronic kidney disease, that kind of comes on pretty rapidly or like acutely. Like, where did that come from? And then I'll see women who have had blood in their urine for many years and they're postmenopausal and nobody can figure out where the blood is coming from. And then I put them on a low oxalate diet and it all clears. I had one
Fascinating.
lady that started with me and she was doing great. She was losing weight. She was feeling amazing. She go gets her blood work done, and I have never seen such terrible kidney function. Like it was literally like almost kidney failure. I'm like, oh gosh. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but what are you eating? And she sent me a picture, and it's all almonds, almond milk, almond yogurt, loads of spinach, Swiss chard. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to cut all of that out for right now. And I gave her a list of foods that had low oxalates. I said, this is what I want you to stick with. And then we're going to go get your blood work done next week again. The next week, it was completely normal. Now, it could have been a faulty test. It could have been. But I was like, I don't know why you had that, but I want you just to eat low oxalates. And I will say that now I think about it a little bit more, and I'm more conscious about it, because when you get people that are eating terribly and then they start to eat healthy, and I take them off of dairy and then they start to eat all this almond milk, which is super high, they switch from maybe low to middle oxalates to super high, then that can really cause some issues. So I just tell them not to eat spinach. And that's an easy enough one to kick out, right? We don't have to eat spinach or Swiss chard, and we can do low almond intake. And there's other almonds. Coconut milk would be a better option. So I just kind of help do that as a major guideline so we don't see those things start to happen. But I've seen calcium oxalate crystals completely clear, blood in the urine completely clear. And I do a master class every month in my Facebook group. And I did like a session on oxalates. And I will tell you, at least 10 women said it changed their life to cut out the high oxalate foods because the joint pain was so severe. And all they did was cut out the oxalates and they literally have no pain. So I think there's probably more to it than what we realize. And I eat low oxalates, but it doesn't mean that I won't ever eat like another almond, but I will tell you, I can feel it in my joints if I eat something that has a lot of something that has high oxalates.
That is absolutely fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that you have had those observations as well. And you said it, and it's a thing that I will say as well. There's one food that I tell people it's just not worth it. Just don't eat this one food. Everything else is negotiable, and we can sort it out as we go. Spinach is not worth it. There's other things you can eat. It's gross anyway. Just don't eat spinach. Don't eat spinach. You're not going to look like Popeye the way you think you're going to. Don't eat spinach. So I love that you came
Exactly.
to that conclusion.
I was thinking, like when I eat spinach, I don't know about you, but I can feel the grittiness on my teeth. I'm like, that must be the oxalates.
It is.
I think I'm like, that must be the oxalates. And it's also in Swiss chard, but I love Swiss chard, but I got rid of it. I don't even grow it in my garden anymore because it just isn't worth it. And it's like, if you could just get rid of those, and then there's a long list of vegetables that you could have if you want to have. So I don't think it's worth it.
It's so interesting that you say that. I've told several oxalate experts, Sally Norton, Monique Attinger, we've hosted recently on our show as well. If I'm trying to describe what oxalate is without feeling like I've got a second head growing out of my shoulders, it's just so bizarre to explain to somebody. That's exactly the example I'll give them. In your mind, take a raw piece of spinach, chew it up. What does your mouth feel like? It's that grittiness, it's that mouthfeel. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, those are literally the crystals that you're eating and
Yeah.
chewing and are going through your gut, and they're causing. Yeah, it's like chewing glass or sandpaper, and that's not even the worst form of oxalate that can actually seep into your body and cause even more damage. So, yeah, that's a perfect example, and I love pointing that out to people. And there's so many other factors that you write about. Your book is very comprehensive, as well as your work. I mean, you're talking about exercise and the toxins and fresh air and sunlight and all that stuff. But I love that you also kind of closed out your book by talking about mindset. Can you tell us like why it's so important to create a healing mindset the way you write about in your book?
Yes, because the way that we think and the way that we speak and the pictures that we see in our head really is programming your body. It creates the energy in the body as well. We know that in our genetics turn on and off with the environment. And this is the study of epigenetics, where we can control the expression of genes based on the environment. And a lot of us think that the environment is outside of us. We think of the air we breathe, the water we drink, but it's also the environment that you're creating inside. And if you are stuck in guilt or fear or anger, you're actually creating an environment inside of you that can't heal. The only way that you can start to heal is in the space of love and gratitude. So I think it's really important that we don't discount that. There is a model, it's called an 80-20 rule, and 80% of our health is our mindset. 80% of our health is all mindset. 20% is all the doing. Everybody's always worried about what do I eat and what do I drink and how do I exercise and what supplements do I need to take. And we're all fascinated and really wound up in all the specifics of that. And do this, no, do that. And so we get all wound up here instead of looking at our mindset. How are we thinking? How are we speaking? Are we being nice to ourselves? Are we in a space of gratitude? And understanding and knowing that you have two minds. You have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is literally a computer program, and it lives by three rules: to keep you safe, to keep you alive, and to keep you away from pain. And we have to remember the way that we position things in our mind. For example, like if you say you need to stop eating spinach, but if I was like, oh my God, if I have to stop eating spinach, I'm going to die. You're literally programming your subconscious mind to think that you're going to die if you stop eating spinach. And so then every time you have to not eat spinach, it's like you're putting your body into pain, and your subconscious mind is going to make you not follow through with that. Right. So it's the same thing. Like if I say, oh my gosh, I don't know why I can't eat gluten. Why can't I eat sugar like all these other people are gluten? And I feel like instead of me, I feel like a victim to my health or a victim instead of me saying, I'm making the choice not to eat sugar or to eat gluten or to eat oxalates because I want to have a very healthy body. That's two completely different mindsets, and it's two completely different ways to program your subconscious mind. But if you're a victim and you feel bad or sad or angry that you can't eat something, then your subconscious mind is going to be like, girl, we are not staying in that place of pain. We are going to eat the cake. We are going to eat the spinach. We're going to do whatever we want. So mindset is huge. There's so many ways and areas to go in mindset. You know, we can talk about conflicting beliefs. We can talk about false beliefs. We talk about all that stuff, but really having some awareness that the way that you're thinking and the way that you're speaking is programming your mind to make that come true. So if you're always saying I'm fat or I'm unhealthy, or you're even joking about that, then you're continuing to program your mind to stay where you're at.
Wow. I don't know how to follow that up with another question. That was an amazing explanation. I absolutely love that. I think it's a lot more important than people really kind of think about. So I really appreciate that. This has been an amazing conversation. I really just felt like we were just scraping the surface of your work. You do so many things and offer so much to everybody. If you could, Dr. Heather Stone, could you explain where people can go to find you, connect with you and your work, and all the different resources that you want to point people to?
Yeah, so I think the easiest place and where people will get the most information is on my Facebook page, Happy, Healthy, and Lean. We have over 100,000 ladies in that group, and we're active. And I do a master class at this time. I do a master class monthly where I spend at least about 10 hours live with all of you ladies every single month. So it's where we connect. I'm there live for Thyroid Thursday every single Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central. So the Facebook group Happy, Healthy, and Lean is the best place to get in a hold of me or in touch with me. And then, of course, everybody can find me on Instagram at Dr. Heather Stone.
10 hours? 10 hours.
Yep.
That's crazy. Do you stay engaged with people like that whole time? That's a long time.
Well, it's not 10 hours straight. I do it over 5 days, and I'm on it for about an hour and a half, and I have to shut myself up at an hour and a half. I'm like, okay, they've had enough. So I go on live for 5 days for an hour and a half each night.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Wow, good for you. That it sounds like you need to take a cow snuggling break somewhere after doing that call to get back connected to nature. It's amazing that
Yeah,
you offer that. It's amazing that you offer that. Well, Dr. Carolyn, Heather Stone, thank you, or Heather Stone,
you're good.
thank. Oh my goodness, I've interviewed a Carolyn Stone, and I crossed two names. Heather Stone, thank you so very much for all of your amazing work. Thank you for your book, which is absolutely amazing, and thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was so much fun. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.